Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Jensen RV Stereo System here in our 2011 SunnyBrook Brookside Fifth Wheel trailer. So if you're like our neighbor today and you have a worn out, old, broken stereo system in your RV, or maybe it just doesn't have all those nice new features like Bluetooth, and you're wanting to bring your RV into the modern era, then swapping over to our Jensen RV Stereo System is going to do that for you. So our previous stereo was the AWM 970, and this one is now the JWM 65, and this is pretty much an exact replacement for that 970 because the mounting spaces all really match up nice and neat. The controls are pretty similar, and the look, while updated, is fairly similar to that old stereo system. It just doesn't have the DVD function that the previous model had. Now with this one, you're going to have your AM, FM, Bluetooth. You can have inputs, whether it's USB, HDMI, or on the back side of this, there's another HDMI port that you can run up to your TV, so that way you can also play your TV's audio through all the speakers in your RV, so that way you don't have to have some separate sound bar just so that you can actually hear what's playing. Along with that, there's going to be 3 separate zones that you can turn on and off. Zones A and B are going to be paired together, so you can turn off those individual speakers, but the music that you play through them is going to be connected. So if I have the stereo on, or maybe I'm playing something through my phone, A and B will always be playing that same music. C will be separate, which is why it has 2 separate mode buttons on here and 2 separate Bluetooths. So if I hit this mode button, that's going to cycle through those different inputs, and then if I hold it, it's going to try to pair for that specific mode or section here. Now if I did it over here, it's going to do it for A and B, and then when we get down to our other buttons here, that's going to be more your inputs. So if you have a USB, maybe you have a flash drive with some music on it and you need to be able to control that, well obviously there's no way to do it with a flash drive since there's no buttons on it. That's where you can kind of scroll through. You get your stop, play, back, next. You can scroll through some of your audio files as well, and then also you got a shuffle button too. Aside from that, we also have just your standard kind of settings up top. We've got our on-off button. This is also going to control the brightness. I know a lot of the time when it's late at night, you want to be able to dim stuff down. You can easily do that, and ours was already dim. Now it's a little bit brighter, and you can see it going back down. Now if I wanted to completely get rid of that, all I'd have to do is just hold the button. It'll shut off. Now when we get to the band button, that's more so for your FM stations. So say you get onto FM 1, you can set each one of those stations that you prefer to have, so that way you have those presets already packed into here and you don't have to go searching for them. Next to that on the right is going to be our time button, so that's going to allow us to change the time on here, which I already have done, but with RVs, as soon as you disconnect the power, it's going to lose that. So something you can do if you really want to, or if you have it hardwired directly to the battery, so that way it doesn't lose those stored settings. Realistically though, most people aren't usually using that. Aside from that, it does also have a sleep function, so if we hit the clock and we cycle through it, I mean, we gotta hold it first, actually, sorry, and then hit alarm. You can set an alarm on here. You can set a sleep timer, so say you only want it to run for about an hour and then shut off, you can have it do that. And let me hold that again, get back into those settings. And then you can start changing your time, which is going to be this back arrow for the hour, the next arrow for the minute. And finally, we have our settings button over here. So that's going to let you kind of go through. You can mess with your Bluetooth settings, dim, on or off. You can change that, kind of getting more into the audio stuff here, resetting things. Let me hold that again. Now we got our bass, we got treble, balance, loud, which essentially just kind of changes the voltage it's going out to those speakers, making the speakers louder itself. And then from there, just obviously we have our volume button, which is also going to be what we use to change those settings in there. Now I'm going to bring it back. So if we look up here on our display, there's going to be different zones, and that A, B, and C are going to pop up. Now, if the zone has these little box around it, that is what you're controlling at that moment. So right now you can see we're on zone A because A and B are covered. Now if I hit the C mode / Bluetooth, you can see the box switched over to zone C. So now I can change things. So say I want to have the volume inside be a little bit quieter than outside, the volumes are going to be separate between these two zones. So we can easily turn our volume up outside, come back over to B and A, and set it to whatever we want it to be. How many speakers can this actually send power to? So our previous system, that 970, was only going to be up to 6 speakers, so that's 2 per zone, your left and your right, essentially, so that you can set that balance. Now we have 2 speakers in the back of our RV, that's our zone B. We have 2 up front, and then we have 2 outside for our zone C. Now on the zone A, so these 2 front ones, there is a second set of A wires, so there's A1 and A2 that are in there. So if you had 2 in the front of the trailer, but then you also had 2 more in the front bedroom, or maybe in a bathroom or something up front, then that would be what those A2 wires could go to, and the entirety of A would all be combined for whatever you're listening to. But then you'd also be able to have extra speakers and get, a little bit more music throughout the trailer, have everything sound a little bit better. So now that we've gone over some of the specifics of our stereo and seen how it works, why don't we talk about the install. So in our case, ours was an exact match, and it fit right into the hole that we already had, and even lined up with our mounting holes. Now in a lot of situations, the stereo system that you're going to switch to is going to be a lot smaller, because as technology is advanced, things have gotten a lot need a lot less space. So essentially what happens is you got a big hole that you got to cover up, and what I'll try to do is get a nice piece of wood, I'll cut it to cover up that hole, and then I'll cut a hole in that wood, and I'll mount the stereo into that smaller wood there, so that way I don't have to worry about trying to have some huge gap that I got to try and fill in, and it just makes the install a whole lot cleaner and look nice. So if that's the case for you, and you just feel like, this is a little bit too much for me to do, or maybe you also need to get some speakers replaced, and it's just kind of out of your zone of expertise. If you feel that way, definitely feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code to find a shop near you and get it professionally installed. Now, if you are wanting to do this yourself, then stick around and I'll help walk you through the process. Before we begin our install, one thing I do want to do is just check each one of our speakers. So we've got 3 sets of speakers, A, B, and C here, 2 sets inside, 1 set outside, and I just want to verify with our old stereo that each one of those speakers is working prior to us switching over to the new stereo, so that way we can rule any issues out if we do end up having an issue once the new one's in. So we will turn on our stereo, and we can, here we got that speaker's working. Speaker over there working, and I can hear it outside as well. So we know all of our speakers are working, so at this point we'll turn that back off. Now on each stereo there's usually going to be some kind of trim ring that goes around it. Usually they don't have the hardware that's mounting it up shown, so it's always hidden behind this. So grab yourself a trim panel tool. You could also use a flathead screwdriver. You're just essentially just trying to get it back behind the trim ring. Pop it off. Once we get it off, there should be some screws. We got 2 on each side, and these are square bits. So, use my square bit. All right, my screw's spinning, so I'm not getting any traction here. May have to stick something behind here to get it to pull out. Yep, same on this side. So, if you're running into that same issue, take that trim panel tool and kind of pry Alright, we got that last screw. It's still kind of stuck into our stereo. And now my next step's always to try and look for the wiring diagram. Usually they'll have one on there, and if not, I will go and look it up online, because that's going to make it super easy. Oh, right here. It's going to make it super easy to know exactly what each one of these wires are, so that way when we switch over to our new stereo, we can easily just go piece by piece. So this is telling us what each function is. So red, it's going to be our 12-volt power. From an accessory power, so that'll be like a backup. Yellow is going to be our 12-volt battery power, so we'll have 12-volt power coming to our battery, so that way it can save any kind of stored settings. And then the red would just be your accessory power running out to probably like an amp, subwoofer, stuff like that. Black, we've got our ground, and then so on when it comes to our speakers. Now when you look at it, there's going to be left and right, you'll see A, B, and C, and then there's going to be plus and minus. So super important that you're really checking this, making sure that you got everything correct, so that way when you swap over, everything is playing correctly. So I'm going to unbundle this mess of wires here. There might also be like a HDMI cable. There's definitely some RCA cables, so those are probably running up to our TV. I'm going to detach those, and we will get down to just the speaker wiring. We actually lucked out. I've done a few of these speakers, and usually none of it's labeled, but we lucked out today. Every single one of these is labeled, so it's going to make it even easier. We don't even have to look at the wiring diagram on our old one. We can just kind of go off of this one, but I am going to grab the wire harness from our new stereo, which luckily also has it all labeled, so that way as I pull one off, I can put the next one right on, and then we don't have to worry about it. By the end of it, this whole wire harness is just going to, you know, drop, you know, obviously on the last wire, but it'll just kind of be hanging out there as I start splicing in the new one. Now, this has some crimp-on connectors. Sometimes you can reuse these, sometimes you can't. In my case, these look like they're pretty crimped down, so I don't want to have like half those, half wire nuts, half butt connectors. I'd probably go with butt connectors in most cases, especially with how many wires you got. So at that point, then you got to start looking at what gauge wire you have. So maybe using wire nuts would be the easiest option for you. If you do go that route, just make sure that you use some electrical tape over it too. You don't want that coming loose on you, just bouncing down the road, and then now your speakers aren't working and you're wondering why. Starting off with my power, I'm going to try to uncrimp this so we can pull it off. We can then disconnect our wiring from it. I'm going to untwist our factory side here, or trailer, I should say. And then over on our new wire harness, I'm going to strip back a little bit more of that casing because it really, honestly, just didn't give us enough. And then we can twist these together. And I know I talked about using different style connectors a little bit ago, but in this case, with what we have today, I am going to have to just use some wire nuts. And when I put these on, I will come back and actually tighten them up a little bit more with some electrical tape as well. But I'm going to get the right sizing here. Make sure you also give it a little tug too. Make sure it's nice and secure. Don't have to worry about falling out. And next we can do our ground. On here that's going to be this black wire. Same thing. We're going to strip back the casing. And we'll find our ground in here, which is most likely the black wire. Yep. This is kind of just a tedious process. It's really not hard. It's just kind of matching like for like. Alright, now one thing I wanted to point out before I get too deep into our speaker wiring is that there is 3 zones, A, B, and C, but on zone A there is an A1 and an A2 because this stereo can actually do up to 8 speakers. So in our case, we're not going to be using the A2 wires. We'll just cap those off, let those sit in here. If at any point our neighbor wanted to add more speakers in, we'd easily be able to just pop the head unit back out, wire right to it, and be all good to go. Starting off with A1, we've got a right and a left, which you can see right here, it's clearly labeled. So what we want to do is look for that matching option on our factory side with the old harness. So this one right here is right A, speaker positive. Now on our other wiring, also keep in mind there's lefts and rights. So my right positive on A, right positive A, these two need to go together. So we can undo this one. Like I said, not always the easiest with these crimp ones to get them to give back. There we go. We can pull the old harness wire off, Grab our speaker wire, and once again, I'm gonna have to strip that a little bit more. Put those two together. And now technically you aren't supposed to really wind them up when you put a wire nut on there. You should let the wire nut do the work, but as long as you tug on it and it's not coming out, you're good. And then I'm also backing it up with that electrical tape. So same process, we're just going to go through each one of these until our old harness is completely free and our new harness is completely wired up, and then we'll be able to actually mount up our stereo. Finally got our whole harness swapped over. There's a couple wires that we still have left, so those A2 speakers, so like I was talking about, we've got an extra set of speaker wires that we don't need for our current setup. And then we also, there's the left and the right sides of that, and then also there's one for an amp remote. That one's not going to be used in our case today, so all this is just going to get kind of tucked up in here. Now we're going to have our antenna wire for our antenna, obviously, and then just the harness itself to click into the back of our head unit. Now before we do that, if you look at the sides, there's openings in it, and that's going to help you pop off the trim ring. Sometimes you can get it by hand. There we go. Sometimes you might need a trim panel tool. And that's going to reveal our mounting holes. And then also, one other thing I want to point out on the back of this, so we have multiple connection points. We've got an HDMI input here, and that is also going to have this zip tie here, and that is for a reason. That's so once you have that in there, you can tighten that zip tie down, and then if there's any bumps in the road, you don't have to worry about the HDMI falling out, and then you have to take the whole speaker out just to pop it back in. You also got some RCA ports. You got your input for the antenna right here, and over on this side is where our harness is going to get hooked into. There's also a fuse right here. So if you're ever having an issue with your stereo, maybe it's just not turning on, pop it out, check that fuse. That's typically the cause of any issues with the stereo. Sometimes the fuse won't totally blow, but if you really look at it, or if you check it for continuity with the tester, you can really determine if it has fully blown or if it's just kind of damaged and it's still allowing some power to come through and then causing your stereo to act weird. Now in our case, there's not an HDMI running up to this TV. They were using RCA ports. They're going to be switching over to a newer TV in a little bit too, so we're going to just leave the RCA ports or connectors alone for right now, and when we switch over to the TV, I'm going to run the HDMI back down into here. But at this point we can just hook in our harness, which needs to go straight in so that we don't bend any pins. Now one other thing I should have done too before I got this far was cap off these extra wires that I had just talked about. So I'm going to do that real quick. That way, say there is any electrical current running through it for any reason, we don't have to worry about anything happening. You can push this back into place, shoot in some of our screws, and I'm just reusing the same ones we had. I'm going to try to line this back up because this actually is pretty close to our factory, or our previous stereo's mounting pattern. It's just slightly wider. So height-wise, it's still the same. We'll grab our trim ring, pop that back on. And actually, I'm going to peel these wrappers off so they don't get stuck in it. And this will just snap into place too. There we go. Now we can turn it on. We'll hold the power button. What we'd want to do is just kind of check, make sure each one of these is actually functioning properly. So if you look at our first set of buttons here, it's got AB, mode, and then the Bluetooth connection. So that's how you actually roll through your modes. So your FM, AM, whether you're going through HDMI, USB, or that Bluetooth. And then also if you hold it, that's going to give you the Bluetooth pairing position for A and B. Same thing over here with C, it's going to do the same thing, and then our speaker buttons are the ones where it actually shows the speaker. So if I turn this on right now, you can hear speaker A is going on, we got some music playing, speaker B at the back of the unit's playing, and then we can go out C, you can really hear actually, really loud. So like I was saying, the two different zones are going to show up in your Bluetooth options here. You got JWM 6.5 Zone AB and JWM 6.5 Zone C. So if you're trying to play through all of the speakers all at once, you're going to need to make sure that your phone is connected to both sets of speakers, or all three sets of speakers I should say. And then your media player will need to be able to send it to both. I know on some phones that might not be an option if you got an older one, but mine at least, I can send that to both after going to my media output. So that might be something you want to look at. There's a bunch of other options when it comes to our stereo as well. So maybe the HDMI input or the USB is going to be a little bit more of an easy option to go to if you're not super familiar with working with Bluetooth. But overall, we know our stereo is working. I've already tested out the radio side of it as well. Obviously, I can't play unlicensed music, so we're just going to skip past that at this point. But that is going to do it for our look at and install of the Jensen RV Stereo System here in our 2011 SunnyBrook Brookside Fifth Wheel trailer. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right stereo for your RV, or you just need help with the installation, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out in your journey.